The chandeliers glittered above, the violins played, and my sister Ava stood at the altar, grinning like she had won the crown of the world. She thought she married a billionaire. She thought she stole my future. But when the truth came out, when I exposed everything, the look on her face was worth every tear I had shed. And this is the story of how my greedy sister married my fiancé and how I ruined their perfect wedding day with one brutal truth. If you've ever been betrayed by family or underestimated by someone greedy, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around, because what you're about to hear might just be the sweetest revenge you'll ever experience. My name is Arya, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you that I trusted my sister with my life. That's how close we were, or at least how close I thought we were. We weren't perfect, but she was my blood, my only sibling, the girl I'd whispered secrets to late at night, the one who'd stolen my clothes and borrowed my makeup, and the one I thought would stand beside me no matter what. Her name is Ava, and she betrayed me in the most brutal way possible. But before I get to the part where she walked down the aisle in my wedding dress, let me start at the beginning, because that's where the knife first turned. I grew up in a family where appearances meant everything. My parents were the type who believed that how people saw us was more important than who we actually were. Ava thrived in that world. She was the golden child, glamorous, reckless, the one who lit up a room the second she walked in. Everyone called her fun and charming. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one, the steady one, the invisible one. If Ava was a firework, exploding bright and loud in the sky, then I was the quiet candle that stayed in the corner, burning slow. And honestly, I didn't mind. At least, I thought I didn't. Then Ethan came into my life. Ethan was everything I never expected. Handsome, confident, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine, sliding into a sports car outside of some mansion in the hills. He had the smile of someone who'd never been told no, the swagger of someone who knew he was winning before the game had even started. And for some reason, he wanted me. I still remember the first time he asked me out. My heart hammered so hard in my chest I thought it might break through. I almost said no, thinking it had to be some cruel joke. Why would a man who called himself a billionaire, a man who casually mentioned investments and estates in passing, want a woman like me? I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. I was just ordinary. But Ethan didn't give up. He called. He texted. He made me feel like I was the center of his universe. Like maybe, just maybe, I deserved this kind of love. And when I introduced him to my family, it was like I had finally brought them the trophy daughter they'd always wanted. My mom's eyes glittered every time he opened his mouth. My dad laughed too hard at his jokes, shaking his hand like he was sealing some business deal. For once, I wasn't the shadow standing behind Ava. I was the one who'd won. But Ava's smile didn't reach her eyes. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. She teased me about Ethan constantly, what kind of car he drove, what brand of watch he wore, whether he ever talked about serious money. She'd lean close at dinners, laugh too loudly at his stories, touch his arm a little too casually. Ethan always brushed it off, but I couldn't shake the tension that curled in my stomach like smoke. One night, I found her scrolling through his Instagram while we sat on the couch. She didn't even look up when she muttered, "You're so lucky, Arya. Men like him don't usually pick women like us. Women like us." The words were sharp, but the smirk on her lips was sharper. And I didn't know it then, but that was the first crack, the first sign that the ground beneath me was about to give way. It started small. A late-night text from Ethan that he was busy. A party he went to that I wasn't invited to. Ava suddenly showing up in outfits that matched his style, dropping comments about how well they got along. Then one night, I came home earlier than expected. My parents' living room light spilled into the hall, laughter curling out like smoke. I stepped inside quietly. Something in my gut told me to move slow. And there they were. Ethan, my fiancé, my future, and Ava, my sister, my blood, sitting too close on the couch, her hand on his knee, his head lowered like he was confessing something. The moment they saw me, Ethan jerked back like I was fire. But Ava? She didn't flinch. She didn't blush. She didn't even pretend. She just smiled. A slow, poisonous smile that told me everything I needed to know. And in that instant, I realized this wasn't just about love. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about power. About Ava needing to prove that no matter what I had, she could take it. And Ethan? He was just greedy enough to let her. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest burning like someone had set it on fire. My fingers curled into fists, so tight they left marks in my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to tear down every memory I'd built with Ethan and every secret I'd shared with Ava. But instead, I whispered one promise into the darkness. If you think you've won, Ava, if you think you can take him and laugh at me forever, you don't know me at all. Because I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The morning after I caught Ava and Ethan together, I told myself maybe, just maybe, I had misunderstood. That's what you do when the truth is too sharp to touch. You wrap it in excuses. But the excuses didn't last. Ethan called me that evening. His voice was soft, heavy, careful, like someone trying not to break glass. Arya, we need to talk. The words stabbed deeper than if he had shouted. My stomach dropped. My throat burned. I already knew. We met at the little cafe where he first asked me out. The same cafe where I had once believed in him, in us. Now every detail, the smell of roasted coffee, the sound of cups clinking, felt cruel, mocking. Ethan didn't waste time. He didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. I don't think this is going to work. You're amazing, Arya, but I need someone who understands my lifestyle. Someone who fits. And then he said it. Someone like Ava. I swear the world went silent. My ears rang. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. My sister. My blood. I wanted to scream at him, at her, at the universe. But all I did was nod, because I refused to let either of them see me fall apart in public. I walked out of that cafe with my chin high and my heart in pieces. At home, my parents didn't even hide their approval. My mom actually had the nerve to say, well, Arya, maybe Ava is just better suited for someone like Ethan. You'll find your match too someday. My match? Like I had been competing for a prize and lost. Like Ethan was some trophy husband my family thought belonged to Ava all along. I wanted to scream. He was mine first. I loved him first. But what good would it do? Ava had already claimed her victory. The weeks blurred. Suddenly, Ava and Ethan were everywhere, on each other's arms at family dinners, parading around town, plastered across social media. Every photo was like a dagger. Ava's smug smile, Ethan's practiced grin, captions about dream life, power couple, can't wait for forever. I stayed quiet, but inside, I was boiling, because I started to notice something odd. Ethan's stories didn't add up. He bragged about being a billionaire, yet Ava was suddenly footing the bill for shopping sprees. He claimed to own a penthouse, but every time I asked where it was, Ava dodged the answer. He wore expensive suits, but I recognized the brand. Luxury knockoffs sold in downtown boutiques. It was like staring at a painting up close and realizing the gold frame was just cheap spray paint. Ethan wasn't a billionaire. Ethan wasn't even close. And Ava? She was too blinded by her greed to see it. The wedding planning began fast. Too fast. One evening, my parents sat me down. My dad had that look, the same one he wore when lecturing me about responsibility. Arya, he said, I hope you're not still bitter. Ava deserves her happiness. We're going to support this wedding. And frankly, I expect you to be there, smiling, standing by your sister's side. Standing by her side? Watching her marry the man who betrayed me? I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. But I nodded. Because that was the only way. If I stayed close, I could watch. I could wait. I could learn. And when the time came, I would strike. I became invisible again. That was my gift. Ava paraded her engagement ring, supposedly worth 6 figures. Ethan boasted about buying her a private island honeymoon. My parents swallowed every word. Guests swooned over their fairy tale. But me? I watched. I listened. And I noticed the cracks Ava refused to see. Like how Ethan's credit card was declined at a high-end restaurant. How the private jet he bragged about was actually a rented charter, paid for with Ava's savings. How he flinched every time someone casually asked about his businesses. Piece by piece, the mask was slipping, and that's when I decided. If Ava wanted Ethan so badly, she could have him. She could keep the liar, the fraud, the fantasy. But I would make sure she married the truth. The weeks leading up to the wedding were torture. I smiled when Ava shoved the invitations in my face. I nodded when Ethan pretended to pity me with his smug, condescending, "I hope you'll find someone who makes you happy too." But at night I planned. I dug. I found out Ethan had no businesses, no investments. His fortune was smoke and mirrors, stories stitched together to bait women like Ava. He lived on charm and borrowed luxury, and Ava had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. My hands would tremble as I scrolled through the documents I uncovered. Records of unpaid debts, lawsuits, scams. Ethan wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't even a millionaire. He was drowning in lies. And my greedy sister was about to marry into them. The day of the wedding arrived like a storm. The venue was dripping in excess. Gold drapes, crystal chandeliers, roses spilling from every corner. Guests in silk and diamonds whispered about Ava's brilliant future, about how lucky she was to marry a man so powerful, so rich. I stood at the back of the hall, my heart pounding, my palms slick with sweat. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was ready, because Ava thought she stole my dream. But she didn't know that I was about to turn her wedding into her nightmare. The morning of the wedding felt like a funeral. Not for Ava. Not for Ethan. For me. Every part of me wanted to crawl into bed, bury myself in blankets, and let the whole circus pass without me. But my promise kept whispering in my ears. If you think you've won, Ava, you don't know me at all. So I got dressed. Not in black, not in mourning, but in deep red. Bold. Unapologetic. The kind of dress that turned heads. If I was going to be forced to stand in the shadows, then at least I'd make sure they remembered I was there. The venue sparkled like a fairy tale. Gold-lined aisles, crystal chandeliers dangling like frozen fireworks, violins playing soft, sweet notes that dripped like honey through the air. Guests filled every seat, whispering about Ava and Ethan, about the billionaire couple. My parents glided around the room like royalty. My mother practically glowed, her pearls catching the light as she bragged to distant relatives about Ethan's wealth. My father puffed his chest, shaking hands and boasting like he'd been the one to seal the deal. Everywhere I looked, the lie was alive. But so was I. And so was the truth. Then Ava entered. Her dress shimmered like a waterfall of diamonds. She looked radiant, yes, but not in the way brides usually do. Her glow wasn't love. It was greed. The kind of radiance that came from winning, from having something no one else could. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. And she smiled. That smug, poisonous smile. The same one from the night I caught her with Ethan. The same smile that said, "You thought you could stop me, but here I am. I won." My chest burned. My hands shook. But I smiled back, soft, mysterious. Because she didn't know. Not yet. The ceremony began. Ethan stood at the altar in a suit so sharp it almost cut light. He looked every bit the billionaire groom. Polished, confident, untouchable. He held himself like a king awaiting his crown. The vows were supposed to start. But the officiant barely got a word in before Ethan launched into his performance. "I vow," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the hall, "to give Ava the life she deserves. To surround her with the luxury she's always dreamed of. To protect her with the fortune I've built." Gasps of admiration rippled through the guests. Cameras flashed. Ava's eyes sparkled as though she were already drowning in gold. And that was it. That was my breaking point. Because his fortune wasn't real. His promises were lies. And Ava, greedy Ava, had chosen to burn me for the illusion of wealth. It was time. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor, echoing like a gunshot through the hall. All eyes snapped to me. Ava froze mid-smile. Ethan's confident posture faltered, just for a second. "Funny thing about vows," I said, My voice steady though my heart thundered in my chest. They only mean something when they're built on truth. A murmur spread across the room. The officiant blinked, caught between confusion and fear. Ava's voice snapped like a whip. Arya, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself. But I didn't. I stepped forward, every heel click against the marble like a drumbeat of war. You want vows, Ava? Let me share one. I vow to never let my sister marry a liar without knowing exactly who she's marrying. Gasps. Ethan's face drained of color. Ava's hands clenched around her bouquet, so tightly the flowers bent. Ugh. I pulled the folder from my clutch, the folder I'd been carrying like a weapon. Inside were the documents I had collected. Unpaid debts, lawsuits, records of scams, even eviction notices. Proof that Ethan's fortune was nothing but smoke and mirrors. With deliberate care, I opened the folder and let the first page fall to the floor. The sound of paper hitting marble was louder than the violins. Another page, then another. Each one exposing Ethan's lies. This, I said, holding up the last document, is your billionaire fiancé? A man drowning in debt. A fraud who lives off borrowed money and broken promises. The room erupted. Guests whispered, gasped, craned their necks. My parents paled, their perfect image crumbling before their eyes. Ethan stammered, she's lying. But his voice cracked. And that was all it took. Ugh. Ava turned to him, her eyes wild. Tell me it's not true, Ethan. Tell me. Ethan tried to recover, flashing that practiced grin, but sweat beaded on his forehead. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Silence hung heavy. And then Ava's face twisted. That radiant, smug glow vanished. She didn't look like a bride anymore. She looked like someone watching her dreams shatter into glass around her feet. She dropped her bouquet. Roses scattered across the marble like spilled blood. You're nothing, she hissed at Ethan. You're not rich? You're not. Her voice cracked. You let me humiliate my sister for this? For nothing. Ethan reached for her, but she shoved him away so hard he stumbled. The hall roared with whispers, laughter, shock. The fairy tale had collapsed. And I stood there, my heart still pounding, my fists trembling, but a strange calm spreading through me. For the first time in months, I wasn't invisible. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Ava's shadow. Because I had just burned her entire fantasy to the ground. For a heartbeat, the ballroom was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. This was sharp, jagged, a silence so thick it felt like everyone had stopped breathing. Ava stood frozen at the altar, her diamond-studded veil trembling as her chest rose and fell in ragged bursts. Ethan's face was pale, his confident smirk twisted into panic. And I felt my own pulse steady for the first time in months. Then the whispers began. She said he's broke. Is this true? All that talk about jets and mansions. Was it all fake? Each word sliced through the illusion Ava and Ethan had built. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their admiration turning into ridicule. You could practically see the tide turning in real time, adoration curdling into disgust. Ugh. Ava snapped first. Her bouquet still lay scattered on the floor, petals crushed under her heels as she turned on Ethan. Her voice was venom. You told me you had billions, she spat, her perfect bridal makeup streaking as tears spilled down her face. You let me flaunt your name. You let me humiliate my own sister. And for what? For debts? For lies. Ethan stammered, reaching out as if he could grab the crumbling pieces of his performance and glue them back together. Ava baby, it's not what it looks like. I do have money, just not liquid right now. Investments take time. Investments. Ava's laugh was hysterical, sharp enough to cut glass. You live in a rental, Ethan. You made me pay for half of this wedding dress. Investments. She shoved him so hard he nearly stumbled into the officiant. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests laughed nervously. Others pulled out phones, recording the disaster like vultures circling a corpse. Ugh. And then came the worst part for Ava. The part she never could stand. The pity. Relatives whispered behind raised hands, sympathy dripping like poison. Poor Ava, always chasing the spotlight. She should have known better. Imagine betraying your own sister for a man like that. Their eyes no longer sparkled with envy. They glittered with amusement, with judgment. Ava's greatest fear wasn't losing Ethan. It was becoming a joke. And in that moment, she was the punchline. Ugh. My parents looked like ghosts. My mother's pearls no longer shone. Her fingers clutched at them like a lifeline as she avoided the stares of old friends. My father's chest had deflated, his posture slumped, his jaw tight. For once, they weren't proud. For once, they couldn't defend Ava. And me? I stood taller. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because the scene unfolding before me was everything I had waited for. Justice served not by screaming, but by truth. Ethan tried one last time. He dropped to his knees in front of Ava, his voice desperate, trembling. Baby, please, I love you. Money doesn't matter. What we have, it's real. But Ava recoiled like he was poison. Her eyes, once sparkling with greed, were now dead, flat, burning with humiliation. You're pathetic, she hissed. And you made me pathetic too. She tore off her veil and hurled it at him. It landed on his head like a shroud, mocking the groom he would never be. The guests erupted. Some clapped. Some jeered. Some shook their heads in disbelief. And that was my moment. I stepped forward, not rushing, not running. Every step of my heels echoed in the silence that followed Ava's outburst. Funny, I said softly, though the microphone carried my words across the hall, how greed blinds people. Ava thought she was stealing my future, but all she stole was a liar. And today, everyone knows it. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Because the truth itself was louder than anything I could have screamed. Ava's eyes met mine then, red, swollen, furious. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at the sister who outshone me. I was looking at someone broken, someone defeated, and I didn't feel pity. I felt release, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. Freedom from Ethan's lies. Freedom from Ava's shadow. Freedom from being invisible. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should pause the ceremony. But there was nothing left to pause. The wedding was over. Ava ripped off her jewelry, storming down the aisle with tears staining her cheeks. Ethan scrambled after her, his designer shoes squeaking against the marble, but she shoved him away with a scream that silenced him once and for all. Doors slammed. Gasps lingered. And in the echo of that chaos, I stood tall. For the first time in years, I felt light. I wasn't the boring one. I wasn't the shadow. I was the one who exposed the truth. The one who refused to be stepped on. The one who finally chose herself. And as the crowd slowly dispersed, their whispers buzzing like bees, one thing became clear. Ava had betrayed me to climb higher. Ethan had lied to keep his illusion alive. But in the end, they destroyed themselves. And all I had to do was shine a light on the truth. When I walked out of that ballroom, I didn't feel broken anymore. The night air was cool against my skin, the city lights glowing like 1,000 tiny promises. For the first time in months, my chest didn't ache. My hands weren't clenched. My heart wasn't heavy. Because justice had been served. Ava had wanted to humiliate me, but in the end, she humiliated herself. Ethan had wanted to play the billionaire, but in the end, his lies collapsed in front of everyone who once envied him. And my parents, who had always pushed me into Ava's shadow, were finally forced to see me. Not as the boring daughter. Not as the safe one. But as the one strong enough to reveal the truth, no matter the cost. In the weeks after, Ava refused to speak to me. She hid from friends, deleted her social media, and drowned in the embarrassment she once tried to throw onto me. Ethan? He disappeared. Rumors swirled about debt collectors chasing him, about lawsuits piling up. His empire of lies had burned down to ash. And me? I started over. Not with bitterness, not with anger, with clarity. I realized I didn't need a man who pretended to be rich, or a sister who thought she could take everything from me. What I needed was myself. My dignity. my strength. And I had finally found both. Looking back, there's one thing I've learned. Greed always exposes itself. Lies always collapse. And people who betray you? They destroy themselves far more thoroughly than you ever could. All you have to do is let the truth shine. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more stories of betrayal and sweet, sweet revenge. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying karma or justice you've ever seen happen in real life? I'd love to hear your stories. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and remember, revenge doesn't always mean anger. Sometimes, the truth is enough.